So guys, this video will be part 4 for our lesson on factoring quadratic trinomials. This will be the last video for this lesson, and all this video is going to cover is a shortcut for factoring trinomials where your a value is 1. In the last video, part 3, we talked about how factoring a quadratic where the a value is 1 is no different than factoring a quadratic where the a value is something other than 1, okay? But there is this shortcut that you can use just to save yourself a little bit of time, okay? So how it works is, first of all, when I say a is 1, that means that you don't have a number written in front of x squared, so you could put a 1 there. That's what I mean when I say a value equals 1. And all you're going to do is figure out the two numbers that multiply to positive 18 and add to positive 9. So multiply to a positive 18, add to a positive 9. That means that both of the numbers have to be positive. So you're just going to list out the pairs of numbers, both of them being positive, that would add to that, or that would multiply to 18. And then once you've done that, you just pick the pair that add to 9. So that would be 3 and 6. So all you would say then is x plus 3 and x plus 6, and you're done. If you were to go through and do, like if you were to put your 1 right here and then multiply across, okay, and go through that long process of doing your grouping like we've done in the previous videos, you would still arrive with x plus 3 and x plus 6 at the very end, okay? But this is a way that can save you from having to do all of that work, okay? So let's look at another one. On this one, we're trying to figure out the two numbers that multiply to positive 48 and add to negative 19. So the two numbers multiply to a positive, and they're going to add to a negative. That means that both of the numbers have to be negative. So let's list out all the pairs we can think of. So we've got negative 1 and negative 48, negative 2 and negative 24, we've got negative 4 and negative 12, and we've got negative 6 and negative 8. Now, if we look at those four there, guys, and we add each pair together, none of those are going to give us a negative 19, okay? So if you ever are trying to factor a quadratic and you cannot figure out the pair of numbers that you need, what you're going to have to do is just start trying different combinations of numbers. So normally start with 1, okay, and then try 2. And when I say try 1 and try 2, what I mean by that is, okay, if you do 48 divided by 2, you get 24. That means that 2 and 24, they would make a pair of factors, okay? So then we've already tried that pair, and we know that that doesn't work. So then you would try 3, all right? So let's try 48 divided by 3. Well, 48 divided by 3 is 16. So 3 and 16, if you add 3 and 16 together, you do get 19, okay? So negative 3 and negative 6 are the two numbers that we want to use, all right? So I kind of got a little sidetracked there, but I wanted to make sure that I explained how do you go about trying to find the pair of numbers if you aren't able to think of them right off the bat, okay? And you just start dividing this number here, that number on the end, start dividing it by 2, 3, 4, 5, so on and so forth. And every time that you get a number that is not a decimal, that tells you a pair of numbers, okay? The number that you're dividing by, so here that was the 3, and the number that you got after you did the division, those two numbers together made a pair, okay? So here, back to the actual quadratic, our two factors are x minus 3 and x minus 16, and that's it, okay? Let's do another one. So on this one, we're trying to figure out two numbers that multiply to negative 60 and add to negative 7. So multiplying to get a negative number, that means the two numbers are going to have different signs, okay? And if we look at the number that they have to add to, they need to add to a positive 7, or sorry, to a negative 7. That means that the bigger of the two numbers is the one that has to be negative. So we've got 1 and negative 60. We've got 2 and negative 30. We've got 3 and negative 20. We've got 4 and negative 15. And then we've got 5 and negative 12. And 6 and negative 10. Okay? And we want the pair that when we add them together, we get a negative 7. That's going to be 5 and negative 12. And guys, in all these examples, I'm listing out all of those possibilities. When you get to the point where you're feeling pretty confident with these, you don't have to write all of this stuff out every single time if you already know what the pair of numbers is, okay? You can just move on to the next step. So here, though, our factors will be x plus 5 and x minus 12. And that's it. They're done. And again, if you had the order switched, if you had the x minus 12 first and then the x plus 5, that's fine. All right, let's do one more. So on this one, we've got a number in front of x squared. That means we need to check for a GCF. We also notice that that number is negative. That means we need to factor away a negative number of some sort, okay? Even if it's just a negative 1 to change the signs, because we don't want that first number ever being negative. So when we look, though, at the three numbers, 2, 42, and 200, all three of those are even, which means that 2 will go into each one of those numbers. So we're actually going to factor away a negative 2. So we're then going to say negative 2 divided by negative 2 is positive 1. And remember, if I don't write a 1 there, it's assumed that a 1 is there. Negative 42 divided by negative 2 is positive 21. And 200 divided by negative 2 is negative 100. So now that negative 2 on the outside, you're still not going to have to do anything with it, just like in all the other examples where we had a GCF that we factored out. So when we look in the parentheses, though, we see that now there's nothing in front of x squared, okay, except for we could write that 1 there. So all we're trying to do now is figure out two numbers that multiply to negative 100 and add to positive 21. So multiplying to a negative 100 means the two numbers have to be, one has to be positive, one has to be negative. The fact that the 21, all right, that number that the two factors have to add to, because it is positive, that means the bigger of the two numbers also has to be positive. So we can start listing out with those factors all the different possibilities. We've got negative 1 and 100. We've got negative 2 and 50. We've got negative 4 and 25. We've got 5, negative 5, and 20. And then we've got negative 10 and, positive 10. There we go. So we want the pair that when we add them together, we get a positive 21. Well, that's going to be negative 4 and 25. So those are our two factors. So all you're going to do is bring down that negative 2 and then say x minus 4 and x plus 5. Those three things together are your factors. Those are the factors of that quadratic. And guys, that's it, okay? So that wraps up our lesson on how to factor those quadratic trinomials, okay?